It has been a long time in the making for a sequel to Watchmen, but Alan Moore and David Gibson, who wrote the 12-issue comic in the mid-1980s, who wouldn't have dreamed that a singular piece of work would make Time's best novels of the 20th century, the only graphic novel to do so, seem outlandish. What has happened in the stratosphere since the 80s seems more relevant today. The rise of superheroes seems more insufferable as they are a perfect specimen of individual bliss. But when they have fought the good fight, they are still good. Watchmen set the standard for most comic books since the 80s, in 1001 Books to Read Before You Die, quote, "It has never been matched," unquote. What has happened in the era of the superhero, it seems like they belong in the movie theater more than a comic book. Comic books have seen a rise, but some people would liken the Marvel Comics crash to the way Captain America is saying Hail Hydra before the Secret Empire series starts. But to be fair, that doesn't make Captain America bad. At the time of at After the time of Secret Empire's publication, when I read it, it reminded me that this was more a tale about Democrats who thought to have fought for the common man, now are made into puppets for corporation or fascist regimes that resemble Antifa parades. What made Watchmen so brilliant is that it doesn't rely on mere parable alone. Alan Moore, whose works are mostly beloved for me, except for From Hell, which is mostly black and white, and if you can squint down to see the writing, that book is for you. Alan Moore has only gotten better in his writing, but the comics industry has blacklisted him from ever working. Alan Moore has spoke in an article saying, "They wanted to offer me the rights back to Watchmen if they could make the prequel series, but he refused, stating, 'If you had given them to me a few years ago like I asked,' unquote, 'it wouldn't have been a problem.' But as a purist, Watchmen stands on its own and will never be matched. The prequel before Watchmen barely made a resonant thud in my view of comics. I would rather read Swamp Thing again before I read Before Watchmen. But it'd make it even harder for me to stay a purist is the release of Doomsday Clock. Highly discussed upon release, this is why most comic book writers call a dead horse's name, because Jeff Johns, a veteran comic writer, was asked to pen the series, but considering that DC is pissing down the backs of Watchmen fans and calling it rain, it seems like a hard-pressed issue to give Doomsday Clock a read. I read the Before Watchmen series, thinking it would be good, but it seems that since the movie's interpretation, the idea of ruining a beloved classic only confirms the belief that while Watchmen never should have had a sequel, this is what we have. Doomsday Clock follows the journeys that what the anti-heroes of Watchmen failed to do was stop Ozymandias from accomplishing his dream of bringing peace to the world. What it only created was a domino effect where nuclear war was on the rise, and now, with the arrival of a Rorschach clone, who is the son of the psychologist Dr. Malcolm Long, thinks he is Rorschach because of the stolen journals from the original Rorschach, now confirms that he must save the world. As Ozymandias, who confirms that he has cancer, brings him and a few other villains along to another universe, where he finds that the world created feels more of an alternate reality to their world, but there are some similarities, but their similarities cause massive reasons to suspect that Dr. Manhattan is inhabiting this world, which he has created. He has only proven right as to the appearance of the comedian, and however he suspects that allowing him to live only has created a double gambit for him to accomplish his dreams. The purpose of the sequel is to merge the characters with the existing members of the DC universe. This goes strictly against the purist idea that there should have been no sequel to begin with. Since Alan Moore doesn't sue, but he rightfully should for the rights, the artists are treated worse than any novelist could imagine. Anyone who writes for other products even knows those characters he pours his eccentricities into are strangled by corporate censorship and allowing the problem of individuality to feel like a gulag camp rather than a place of creativity. Yes, DC is to blame for even admitting this idea should be enacted, only creating a hostile relationship with Alan Moore and the company. But do the companies care? In this case, no. Companies, after a certain point, do not care what people think. It's only since the introduction of video games that companies, publishing, or otherwise have admitted that audiences do matter. I am in the firm belief, as a creator myself of over 51 novels, know that novels are a different vehicle than comics, movies, and visual media such as games. What has felt like a consensus that seems ready to meet consumer demands are not found as fruitless endeavors to make the audience love them. I say that with quotes because we all know that if we had the chance to work on beloved works of art and get paid for them, we would look like Ving Rhames in Pulp Fiction with the red gag in our mouth, getting anally raped by the corporations telling us what to do, which is why the independent stream has grown or multiplied. But concerning the series, I had lost all faith in the series around 7, meaning that since the reveal of Ozymandias not having cancer and Dr. Manhattan's state as nebulous as the series, I gave up. But it's with 8 that shows while Superman thinks he can control the world of Metropolis, or others, darker forces preside over the series, meaning that Dr. Manhattan is ultimately more in control than they think. Batman, who warns Clark that it's not Firestorm who is responsible, but ultimately Dr. Manhattan, due to his prior engagement with the son of Malcolm Long, who has a journal of Rorschach the previous before him. What we know now is the ultimate reason as to why the sequel is made, is to see if Watchmen can truly coexist with the world of DC. It should have never existed at all, but to corporations there are profits to be made from beloved series that spawn careers into an artist like Alan has no real control over it. Concerning the reason, I think Doomsday Clock might stand a chance if it doesn't piss all over Alan's original vision. Yes, it can never be duplicated in the original blocks of character blocks or the characters that were typed on Alan Moore's typewriter and delivered to Dave Gibbons' house. Am I a fan of the original series? Yes, and I think it should continue to thrive by itself since it was never meant to be a part of the larger universe. As a novelist, I do not adhere to one large universe where characters inhabit in the same small town. William Faulkner made his whole career about Yakapanata, and I admit I may be pronouncing that wrong, but it still probably sounds more right than I will admit. And in a way, which should have been more crazy to most of us, but considering that William Faulkner didn't have the internet and didn't know about the rest of the world, chose his own universe. Watchmen has its traces of American authors, including William S. Burroughs, whose novel The Nova Express is the name of the restaurant where Rorschach, in the Alan Moore version, receives tips passed on to him from a trash can from handwritten notes from his sources. What we have in Doomsday Clock is not a true representation of or acceptance of Alan Moore's vision, and to make Dr. Manhattan a villain in Doomsday Clock to the other characters is a betrayal of the source material. He does not destroy New York like in the infamous movie version directed by Zack Snyder. What we have in this comics is, hey, we love you, Alan, but we were ordered to do this with guns to our head, and we have to think about our own skin mentality rather than a pure hatred for the work. Doomsday Clock is not an abortion, but like the alternate universe version of Doomsday Clock, reminds us that this is a corporate version of a sequel that should never have been made. Am I against it? As a purist, yes. But as an individual who values his own opinion over others, I've kept up with it and it has been interesting, but it will never hold a candle to Alan Moore's version. Ever. If they manage to pull out 12 series out of Doomsday Clock, with the corporation shitting all on the artists such as Alan Moore, he should by all rights sue for the control of Watchmen so that nothing like this can continue to happen. As Alan Moore said, they haven't had original thoughts since then, and they still rely on things 25 years old. So, with that being said, tell me what you think. Do you think the series should have been abandoned since it's been published sporadically and never once been talked about since? Are you a purist or generally interested in the fate of Watchmen? This is Lewis, and until then, see you next time.